Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Erin Keating, for those of you who don't know me, and I want to get us started. On behalf of myself and my students, I'd like to welcome everyone to this very special session of our English class Beyond High Fantasy. Before moving into our program, I'd like to acknowledge the lands that we're gathered on today, where most of us here perform our work, teaching, studying, supporting our programs every day. The University of Manitoba campuses and research spaces are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuit, Assinininuk, Dakota, Aote, Dene, and Inuit, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. The University of Manitoba recognized that the treaties signed on these lands are a lifelong, enduring relationship, and we are dedicated to upholding their spirit and intent. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and the present. With this understanding, we commit to supporting Indigenous excellence through active reconciliation, meaningful change, and the creation of an environment where everyone can thrive. Our collaboration with Indigenous communities is grounded in respect and reciprocity, and this guides how we move forward as an institution. The commitment to recognizing and understanding the land that we occupy and its original peoples holds special resonance to my mind for the world-building projects of fantasy that seek to shape entire worlds in meaningful and relational ways. Mindful of Ursula Le Guin's insistence that one of the most powerful aspects of the fantasy genre is its ability to reveal and indeed insist that the human is not the universal, and that relationality exists not only between humans, but also between the human and the non-human, whether that means animals or natural environments. Before I turn things over to Dean Heidi Marx, I'd like to acknowledge the many people who have come together to make this event a reality. This event would not have been possible without support from the Faculty of Arts Dean's Office, and in particular, Dean Marx and Jonas Brandt's administrative support, the Faculty of Arts Endowment Fund, the Department of English, Theatre, Film, and Media, and the administrative support provided by Sofia Martignoni and our head, Dr. David Watt, and the arts communications team, in particular, Amber Osterman, whose idea was to arrange this visit in the first place, and who has been vital to overseeing the many details required to make this type of event a success. So a couple of logistics too before I invite Dean Marx up. There are accessible washrooms that way down the hall. You have to exit by these doors and then sort of go around. And as you may have noticed, we are recording the lecture, but we will not be recording the Q&A. The Q&A is just for those of us in the room here. And there will be, there's an arts photographer here taking photos as well, just so you're aware that that is happening. So without further ado, Dean Marx.
Thank you, Erin. On behalf of the Faculty of Arts, I'd like to welcome each of you to this exciting event. In fact, it's the first event that's been held for arts in this space in quite some time because it's been shut down. So we're also excited to be back in the Great Hall. It's wonderful to see an audience in the middle of the day knowing how busy each of you are. I want to thank Dr. Keating for helping to arrange this event with her Beyond High Fantasy English course, which is a perfect fit for a visit with Gavriel Kay. And it's just generous that she's opened up her class to the rest of us. I hope you all had a restful reading week and were able to use the time to refresh, catch up, or get ahead, and hopefully sprinkle in some fun as well. Thank you for taking the time to join us. The Faculty of Arts is committed to creating opportunities for students throughout your degree. There are, of course, your studies, but there are also research opportunities, experiential learning opportunities, travel and exchange opportunities, leadership opportunities, and work experience opportunities through programs such as co-op and field placements. An additional type of opportunity is connecting with and learning from Faculty of Arts alumni from a variety of careers. Today's event is one of those opportunities. We are so pleased to welcome and are most grateful to Gavriel Kay for joining us not only today, but for a few days this week. It is so generous of him to take time to visit us here at the University of Manitoba. Dr. Keating will tell us more about Mr. Kay's illustrious career in a few moments, but I will just say that Mr. Kay is an international best-selling author, award-winning author, and an Order of Canada recipient whose career has spanned about 50 years. But most notably to us, he is a University of Manitoba Faculty of Arts alumni who graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree as a philosophy major. While we have been following Mr. Kay's career for a while, I first spoke to him myself a few months ago, and I was very struck by his generosity and kindness. When I asked if he'd be willing to come and hang out with us for a couple days, he said, sure, and he said, what do you need, and what would you like, and how can I be of help? And I was just so impressed and touched by that. As we hear from Mr. Kay today, I encourage you to take in both his story and his thoughts on fantasy and history. There will be a Q&A following his talk, so be sure to be thinking as you're listening so that you can come up with some questions as he speaks. Or perhaps you have already got your questions in hand about his writing, travel, and creative research process ready to go. Please take advantage of the wonderful opportunity we have to learn having Mr. Kay here with us. Guy, we are very thankful for your generosity, the generosity of your time to talk with us, meet with students, answer our questions, and share your experiences. When students see examples of successful alumni who started just as they are, it not only builds confidence in the choice they've made for their degree, but also in themselves. When we put our mind to it, each of us can do almost anything with an arts degree. There are many opportunities in the working world for arts students, and through events like this, we hope to continue to demonstrate that to you, to show you what you could be. I hope you enjoy today's event. I know I'm looking forward to it immensely. And if you like what you see today, I also encourage you to look for more opportunities to engage with your faculty throughout the year. Hopefully some of you are signed up for the Arts Career Roundtable happening tomorrow night, where 13 arts alumni from various backgrounds, majors, and industries will share their experience, their career experience with students in a speed networking style event. This event is currently sold out with over 120 students registered, so I hope you were able to secure a spot, but if not, it's held annually and you can try again next year. Also visit our website and social media anytime to learn about other events and opportunities for students, like writing workshops, theater shows, scholarships, conferences, podcasting workshops, research opportunities, and so much more. Now I'm going to turn things back to Dr. Keating. Thank you all for coming today, and thank you again, Guy, for being here.
Okay, just short remarks from me, then we'll get to things. So when Amber suggested inviting Guy Gavriel Kay to campus this fall, and this sort of happened this summer, I jumped at this chance. I grew up basically with his novels. Ever since his first fantasy novel, The Summer Tree, was my mother's choice for family bedtime reading after we'd finished Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I was perhaps a bit too young for this, as those of you who have read the trilogy may know, but I'm definitely not complaining, as Kay's approach to fantasy and secondary world building has influenced my reading habits ever since. Over the years, even with much less time for reading, his books have always been high on my to-read pile and as comfort rereads. So as many of you may be aware, Guy Gavriel Kay is the author of 16 novels and a book of poetry. After he graduated from the University of Manitoba, he assisted, actually I think it was while he was still a student, perhaps, he assisted Christopher Tolkien in editing the fragments that became the Silmarillion, which is a dream use for an arts degree. While this didn't mark Kay's entry into fantasy writing, as he returned to Canada to do a law degree at the University of Toronto afterwards, when he did turn back to the world of fantasy, it fundamentally influenced the approach that he took in his first fantasy trilogy, The Fiona Bar Tapestry, the first book of which was published in 1984. In addition to the many novels that came out after that trilogy, Kay has written book reviews and social and political commentary for the National Post and the Globe and Mail in Canada and the Guardian in England, among other media. Kay's books are international bestsellers, with translations of his fiction exceeding 30 languages. He has spoken and read on behalf of his publishers and at literary events around the world. He was nominated for and has won numerous literary awards, including the 2008 World Fantasy Award for Best Novel for Isabel, and is the recipient of the International Goliardos Prize for his contributions to the literature of the fantastic. In 2014, he was named to the Order of Canada, the country's highest civilian honor, quote, for his contributions to the field of speculative fiction as an internationally celebrated author. I could go on, but like you all, I'm eager to get us to our main event. Kay's talk today is entitled Home and Away, Some Thoughts on Fantasy and History. Please join me in welcoming Guy Gavriel Kay.
Good afternoon. Nobody but me has noticed that the clock behind me is 2 hours off. You cannot blame daylight savings or anything like that when you're 2 hours off. Thank you, both of you, for generous and in some ways inspiring remarks. I feel inspired when I look at the placards to my left, because history, philosophy, and English were my passions and my studies when I was here. And I hate to say it, but over 50 years ago was when I first arrived at the University of Manitoba. I am awash in nostalgia as I stand here speaking to you. I'm also daunted when Dr. Marx speaks of an exciting event. Nobody warned me I had to be exciting. The closest I'll get is I wore my official author jacket. This jacket has been with me around the world for decades. It's older than a great many of you. My wife knows that I'm to be buried in it eventually. I hope not this afternoon. One of the reasons I was so happy to say yes when Dr. Marx first contacted me about establishing some sort of event, relationship, liaison with the University of Manitoba is because of how meaningful to me, how enjoyable for me my time here was. My studies at the university were formative. I'm going to use the exciting word again at times. I studied with and later became friends with some immensely brilliant, distinguished, witty people. One of them is responsible for teaching me how to roll a joint properly. This is an important life lesson when you're 17. I feel, just to echo something that was said before, I feel a sense of bewilderment and frustration at the degree to which an arts degree is being systematically devalued in the popular media and culture. The importance of the enhancing value of studying the humanities for me is not really a matter of discussion or dispute to my mind. It borders on the self-evident that if you can be helped to become a wider ranging, deeper, critically thinking, exposed to art and history and literature and culture, you live a richer life. And you bring that richness to the people in your life. You share it amongst each other. That this is currently under siege as a concept is deeply dispiriting. I value the pushback that something like this represents the idea that as students, busy as you are, undoubtedly are, the offering of, I can't promise exciting, but the offering of additional extracurricular interactions is part of what a university is about for me, what it can be about. So I want to salute Dr. Marx and Dr. Keating and thank them for the opportunity to be with you today. I could be flippant and say I'm still calibrating blame between the two of them, but the truth is that I'm deeply grateful and appreciative, and I'll look forward to mingling with you over coffee. They say it's too early for vodka, but that's acceptable, I understand. And I'm not rushing off when the formal part of this ends and we move to juggling and playing hockey and whatever. I was asked to prepare some formal remarks. And I've done this often. One of the secrets for those of us who do a lot of travel and speaking in one country or another, in one venue or another, is that you feel over-identified with some topics. You feel you have thought about and engaged with certain topics all over the place. And if you step back just a little bit, you realize that that may be so for me, but only the audiences that I spoke to, the ones who stayed awake through my remarks, will remember and have thought about these issues. Most people don't know what a given person has to say about something. So although I've talked about some of these things before, I haven't at the University of Manitoba. I haven't here. So I'm hoping that it is both new and perhaps provocative and engaging, and maybe once or twice funny for all of you. I should say that what follows has a long lineage. I've given variants of this speech in Zagreb, Warsaw, Glasgow, and as far off as Toronto. I should also say that these remain thoughts in a lifelong process of evolving. By the way, I think that's what humanities encourages us to do. It encourages us in a lifelong process of evolving what we think, what we value. I think that's central to that kind of education. These thoughts represent for me a partial defense of fantasy as a mode of fiction and an explanation to a degree of what I've been doing with the genre for the past 35 years and more. It's an attempt to wrestle with some aspects of fantasy and fiction in general and ethics that have engaged me for some time. Fantasy is usually seen as, quote, escapist fiction, and that is often said as a criticism. Fantasy readers escape from the responsibility of reality, critics of the genre say, hiding from the real world amid dragons and magic. The accusation ignores some obvious truths. All good storytelling is escapist in a very basic way. As we are drawn into the lives of people in a book, we forget for a time, if the writer is skillful, the stresses and details of our own lives. We immerse ourselves in the tale. We are emotionally moved and intellectually engaged by what happens to invented, imaginary people in a book. Often, too, there's a kind of book that doesn't intend to be important, profound, even thought-provoking. It wants to amuse and entertain, much as most television and most films do. These are the books one reads on an airplane, a beach, or for 15 minutes before falling asleep at night. It is hard to read challenging fiction in 15-minute increments. But for many people, that is all the time they have for books today. Light fiction serves a function as much as television or Hollywood do. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a need for it. Fantasy can fill that need. So can science fiction, romance, mystery, spy thrillers, horror, travel writing, any kind of book or genre. The steadily growing commercial market for fantasy and science fiction over the last 40 years has meant, in the normal way of things, that there is more and more of it. But for me, it's a mistake, and a serious one, to assume that because many works in a given field are of a certain sort, that the field, the genre, must be defined that way. And this brings me to my first main point this afternoon, something I have been arguing for years. Fantasy fiction has the capacity to be as important, as moving, as thought-provoking as any other form of literature we have. Indeed, in some ways, the journeys, quests, motifs of traditional fantasy works can come closer to mirroring the inner journey of the human spirit than anything else. The patterns of myth, folklore, archetype, and fairy tale that can be embedded in fantasy are ancient and immensely powerful. And the genre can tap more directly into these ancient wells than just about anything else. I'm not saying something new here. Psychologists and those who've made a study of myth and legend have been noting this for decades. There's another strength of the genre that's quite different, however, and it's less discussed, except by me in all my speeches. Fantasy is not just about magic and myths. It can also be a way of dealing with history, with elements of the past. And this has fascinated me more and more over the last many years. But in raising this idea, an obvious question emerges. Why write fantasy about the past? Why not historical fiction with its long and honorable tradition? What can fantasy do that historical fiction cannot? Or putting it another way, what traps can fantasy avoid that historical fiction risks? Why write about, as I have, the peninsula of the Palm instead of early Renaissance Italy, or about an invented Sarantium instead of the real Byzantium? As some of you will have noticed, I've introduced my own invented worlds at this point. I don't like to do this in most general discussions, but I suspect I can make some of my points most clearly by reference to actual books, and I suppose I know my own better than those of other writers, so I hope I'll be forgiven. I'll add that I refuse to be drawn in here into any postmodern discussion about whether any author ever understands his or her own work. Those of you who wish to pursue that can buy me a drink after we're finished here and take your best shot while I drink mine. All right then, what can fantasy do better? Or what can it do that is unique? First of all, I'll argue, fantasy allows the universalizing of a story. It takes the incidents out of a very specific time and place and allows the writer and the reader the possibility of seeing the themes, the elements of that story as applying to a wider range of times and places. It detaches the story from a narrow context and permits those aspects of it that engage the writer to be considered by the reader in a new light. In this way, paradoxically, because the story is a fantasy, it may actually be seen to apply more to a reader's own life and world, not less. It can't simply be read as being about something that happened, say, 800 years ago in Spain. The folktale quality of fantasy brings the story home to a reader's experience of the world, as all folktales aspire to do, offering truths about the human condition. An example? If I had written a book about how the Italian city-states of the 15th century were so bitterly feuding amongst each other that they not only permitted France and Spain to invade, they invited those invasions. Such a story would likely be read as concerning that time and place, a sad prelude to the modern history of the country of Italy. But if the story is set in an invented world, a once-upon-a-time world, it is no longer just about Italy 500 years ago. It is about how any and all places are at risk when internal hatreds overpower the perception of danger from outside. In Tigana, my fourth novel, I was also interested in how a tyranny seeks to control conquered people by erasing or rewriting their past. It happens all the time. We are engaged in a constant discussion here and elsewhere in Canada of how that erasure has taken place and is still taking place. Statues are toppled, squares and streets are renamed, history books are burned, and new ones written with corrected truths. You can write this about the English in Ireland, about the Soviets all through Eastern Europe before the current Russian invasion, about Maoist China eradicating all Chinese history before its own time. There are so many examples. And yes, there are, as I said, some today very close to hand. Many writers have explored these various times and places. Many very fine books have been written. Some not so fine, but we won't go there. But what about the notion that this practice, this technique of erasing culture and history is a universal and powerful tool of tyranny, a trope of the human condition? What happens if a story dealing with this theme is set in an invented world? My argument, all those years ago and today, is that if the fantasy elements are well used, they allow the exploration of this motif in a fashion that is very relevant to today and to readers and to their past. The reader cannot simply say to himself or herself, this story is about Cromwell in Ireland. The eradication of history and culture, of an identity, a name in Tigana, is an attempt to look at this idea and have it be applied by the reader to all such situations. I cannot assert that my book succeeds in doing this. Only readers can decide that on an entirely individual basis. But it does seem to me an important, a legitimate way of using the fantastic. And that is the point I'm urging upon you now. That's one aspect, then, of this idea of fantasy as a means of exploring history. Here's a second one. Those traps I spoke of, the moral ambiguities of historical fiction. Well, let me illustrate that by first reminding us all that history isn't just the distant past. Sometimes it's a very short while ago. So, one question might be for novelists, for readers of fiction, are there limits? Or ought there to be limits to what writers of fiction are allowed to do with real people and their lives? Can we make King Henry VIII of England say anything we want him to say to his wife, any of his wives, in bed, because, well, it's just a book, a novel. Everyone knows we're making it up. Can we hide behind the fact that it's fiction, even while we seek to gain readers and attention by using real, celebrated people as a marketing tool? Is there a moral dilemma here? If someone is famous, can we do whatever we want with their life? If they are utterly obscure, can we do what we want? If they are dead, like Marilyn Monroe, long dead, like Henry VIII, living, but so famous their lives are considered public property, like Madonna. I don't have the answer to these questions, but they're questions I find worth wrestling with, as more and more fictions today seems to incorporate the lives of real people, their thoughts, their emotions, their invented actions, with no constraints seen as lying upon the author. So how does fantasy address this? I suggest that by placing the story in a fantasy setting, using invented characters, even if closely drawn from history, inspired by real people, we're acknowledging that guesswork, invention, fantasy underlie our treatment of the past. And that, for me, is an honest and even a liberating thing for a writer to do. Please understand me. I'm not saying this is the only honorable way to approach the matter of the past. Far from it. Otherwise, I'd be forced to relinquish War and Peace and even Shakespeare's brilliant invented monster, Richard III. A dazzling exercise in character assassination done for the Tudor usurpers. What I am offering is the notion, too little mentioned or thought about in my experience, that fantasy used to deal with history, had the potential to be one such honorable, powerful way of addressing the sorts of issues the past so often throws at us today. The genre, in other words, isn't just an evasion, an escape, a hiding from truths. It can be an acknowledgement that those truths are complex, morally difficult, and that many different sorts of techniques and processes may lead to a book resonating deeply for a reader in a time. Many years ago, the Canadian academic, poet, literary critic Douglas Barber generously described my Fianna Fáil tapestry as the kind of escape that brings you home. I realized, reading those words back then, that this was how I'd always seen the potential of the entire genre. I'd like to end these remarks, and I do hope I haven't outstayed your patience, with that comment. Because this, for me, is what fantasy can do and be if we only allow it. It can take us away, and it can bring us back. Thank you.